You're listening to episode 209 of the Leadway podcast. And today we're breaking down all things sober living in group homes with Jim Boad, who had 20 long term rentals during COVID. And all of a sudden, his tenants stopped paying rent and he had to pivot quickly and then has scaled up to 14 homes and with now four under construction and 12 new lots coming. If you're hungry to build wealth, escape the W 2, and create a life on your own terms, but nobody around you is talking about how to actually do it, you're in the right place. My name is Chris Rickenbaugh, and I sit down with investors and entrepreneurs who have already figured it out, breaking down the vehicles, the mindset, and the exact moves that built their wealth. You can follow my personal journey on Instagram and TikTok at chris.rickenbaugh. That's chris.richenbach. And wherever you're listening to this podcast, it is available wherever you listen to podcasts. I just want to say thank you for listening and keep sharing, and subscribing this podcast so we can reach more people. Now, let's get to Jim's episode. Jim Boad, welcome to the Leadway podcast. How are you doing?
Amazing. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm pumped to get you on because cash flow is something that everybody is looking for right now. It doesn't work with first single families anymore. You know, Airbnb's tanking and having issues, and it's getting really competitive. So, you know, when I saw that you were doing sober living, I thought you'd be a great guest for the episode because, you know, that's just one of those little niche areas, but it pumps out tons of cash flow. So, you know, before we jump into it, I want you to kind of introduce yourself and, you know, who is Jim Boad and what do you do?
I am Jim Boad, and I help people turn properties into sober living homes that stay full, truly make a difference, and genuinely cash flow. So I'll jump into a quick little backstory.
Yeah.
I've been a real estate investor for about 25 years. Started off as just a straight up fix and flipper, bought one house, had a regular job working in a restaurant as a bartender while I flipped it. Got up to the point where I was flipping 10 to 12 houses a month, got my whole family involved in real estate, and then went through a couple different market crashes. We won't get deep into any of that,
Yeah.
but because those are whole other episodes.
Yeah.
But about 4 years ago, I found sober living, and I have never looked back. It's the most fulfilling business I've ever owned, and it's the most cash flow profitable business I've ever owned. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. So
Yeah. Now, in the beginning, before you kind of got into the sober living homes, were you flipping houses? Were you wholesaling, just rentals? Like what did that look like before you kind of found sober living homes?
I was on the Autobahn of the Burr method. So
Okay.
I was buying homes, I was fixing them up, I was refinancing them, and I was repeating. And what really pushed me into sober living is COVID. When
Yeah.
COVID hit, everyone stopped paying rent in almost all of my homes, and I was decimated. I
Mhm.
thought I was losing everything I'd worked 20 years for.
Yeah. How many homes did you have at that time?
I had right about 20.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you probably had some pretty good cash flow coming in. And then I think COVID was the major pivot for everybody because I mean, even for me, like I was still in college at that time and figuring out like, all right, well, I have time now. I saw this finance book on the shelf. I picked it up and look, now I'm here in real estate a couple years later. So, COVID was just such a huge pivot for everybody. So, you know, being able to transfer into the sober living homes, who introduced you to that? And, you know, how did you find it?
Absolutely. It was pure doom scrolling. I was going through all my financials and nothing was not red. So I just got online to lose my mind for a minute. And I ran across a group home coaching course. And it was just an online coaching course. And it didn't really specify, it was just generic group homes. So elderly care, kids phasing out of foster care, and sober living. So I looked at it and it started making sense. And they were talking about the profits that they were making and that they were still actually being profitable through COVID. I bought the course and the next day I started implementing it because I had just started selling homes. Because there were two ways in Washington state that you were able to get out of a bad tenant because you weren't allowed to evict them for anything other than if you were going to move into the home or if you were going to sell it.
Hmm.
So I just started prepping to sell all my homes because I was going to lose them one way or the other if I didn't. And I jumped into that course. And like I said, the next day, I started taking action on it. Within a week, I had one up and running. And it was because I did have homes available to me because I was always kind of in different phases of it. I had a house that I was working on. I had a house that I was, that was actively rented, and I always had something I was selling. So
Now, when you're kind of looking into, I mean, you took the course and within a week, so you're an action taker. And I want to highlight there that you had 20 homes that, they weren't terrible problem properties. It was just because the market had shifted with COVID. Nobody had money coming in to be able to pay the rents. Were you converting the homes that you had into the sober living homes, or were you going out and buying more properties to turn them into the sober living homes on that first 1 to 3?
the first three I had in my inventory, so I did just switch those right over to sober living. And then as things shifted and I was able to kind of start getting people out and things like that, I started shifting all my other ones. But ultimately, what I did do is I sold a lot of homes and I did end up buying new homes to do this with just because I didn't have the ability. Because if you lie and get caught, you get in trouble. So I wasn't going to
Yeah.
say, I'm moving into 9 different homes. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So now what's kind of like the red tape with these? Because uh for seeing the sober living, I know those are kind of under like some type of business to where they get placement. Like how, what's kind of the red tape that you have to do? Is there background checks to be able to open up one of these homes?
So let me kind of just start with a quick distinguishing thing. The
Yeah.
way that these homes work is I think a lot of people convolute sober living with rehab. So rehab is its own thing. They're going to go into an inpatient drug clinic and be there normally 30 days and detox and kind of find a path forward from there. And then there's a lot of facilities out there that do this, and those are completely different. You have to run those. It's a commercial style business, like it's a business, and you have to have regulations and licensing and all kinds of things. Then there's the big missing gap. What do you do after rehab? Normally, people are just going home after rehab, and when you go back to the same place you were doing bad things, what do you end up doing? More bad things. So, and then if you Google in an area, like even in your area, you probably Google it and you'll find 15 or 20 inpatient drug clinics, but you're going to find 2 or 3 sober living homes. So there's a huge gap there that's missing of the need for these sober living homes, and they're starting to get popular. But with that, sober living homes are just a regular residential home with normal people that move into it that just happen to be in recovery. And like you can put these up pretty much anywhere. There's about 5 different states that have a little bit more licensing, but like in my state, which is pretty heavy regulated, there's no licensing. Like I could open a new sober living home tomorrow, which if I wanted to, I absolutely could. Like it's just boom, here's a sober living home. I can start moving people in.
That's awesome. So it's kind of, is it kind of like co-living, or how are you actually setting up the property? Like what are you supplying in the home?
Yes, and it's very much like co-living. But I make it a move-in ready home. So there's dishes in the cabinet, there's utensils, there's beds. Everybody that comes in gets a new set of sheets and a mattress protector.
Hmm.
Um, but like you're not taking them to like an Airbnb status because you are going to have turnover in these homes. People are going to cycle through them. Some people are going to come in and be there for a day, and some people I've had people in my homes for over 3 years. So there's definitely the gamut of it. But it costs anywhere, depending on the size of the home, it's anywhere between $3,000 and $6,000 to set one of these up, with all the things you need in it, because you got to buy mattresses and pots
Yeah.
and pans, but you can do a lot of dollar store stuff. You're not going for luxury, you're going for function.
Gotcha. Yeah, because that's one of the different things I've seen with co-living, because I brought Christiane Silvera. She does co-living down in Atlanta, and what she's doing for her properties that get listed on Pad Split, she's decking them out. I
Yes.
mean, it's almost like kind of like a mini Airbnb. Each room has its TV. They got some type of dresser, bed, and I we ran through the numbers on it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's quite a bit of money. And then you look at the Airbnbs and what you have to do to separate yourself now. So the sober living homes, they sound, a little bit lighter on that side. So I want to jump forward in your story because currently you have 14 homes, you have 4 under construction, and you have 12 lots coming. What does today look like on the, being able to set up one of these homes, and what does the cash flow look like? Because are you taking out the living room as well? Like how what do the numbers look like on in these properties?
So the biggest thing I try to get people to do, because I definitely looked at co-living and I like that path. I try to not have to go in and do lots of heavy lifting. If you have to, you have to. Some areas don't have 4 and 5 bedroom homes abundantly, so you might have to convert a garage or convert a living room. But I try to keep them as normal of a home as possible. So that way, one day when I do ultimately sell them as a home, I'm not tearing weird ant farmy stuff out. Plus,
Yeah.
I want it to feel like people are just living in a home, not a weird institution where I've got just these little roll bedrooms for 100 people to be in that home. But
Yeah, almost looks like the cubicles out there with all the with like 8 different rooms in a house.
correct. But one of the big things that we do, and there's two main reasons for this, is we do share bedrooms. There's 2 people per bedroom. And the first reason for that is your rate of recovery when you have accountability is so much higher. We have solo rooms because I do have some places that have rooms that are under 100 square feet, and you have to have here a minimum of 50 square foot a person. So those are solo rooms. And those are almost the only rooms that I ever have relapses in because people are in there and they can hide in their room and they can get in their own head and they have less accountability. Where,
Interesting.
yeah. And then also, of course, the cash flow because I don't mind talking my numbers. In my area, we get 850 per bed. So I bring in $1,700 per room. So it becomes the cash flow becomes very, very good on these homes. And I don't like to have less than 4 bedrooms, and 5 bedrooms is really the sweet spot. Of course, if you can have more, but like
Yeah.
I'm not finding a lot of 8 and 10 bedroom homes.
Yeah, the 4 to 5 bedroom. That was going to be my next question is, what's the ideal size for this property? If somebody's going to start scrolling Zillow after listening to this, like what are they going to start looking for and what's ideal for one of these homes?
Absolutely. Square footage of the home isn't as important as the 4 bedrooms. And if you're going to have 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, you need a minimum of 2 baths because everywhere I found so far, you can do up to 6 people per bathroom. And you don't want to hit your minimums. The reality is you want people to want to be in these homes. So like these aren't just a hey, I can make this as uncomfortable for people as possible and still cash flow. You're not
Hmm.
trying to be a slumlord. You're trying to really change people's lives, but give them some level of normalcy. Again, not being in that ant farm like I talked about.
Yeah, so and that's just like a cool, difference from co-living to where, you want as many bathrooms in there as possible. It's like you do, but you also don't have to. It's just completely different model. But, how are you managing this? Because, there's a lot of people living in these homes and it's kind of like you have roommates, things happen. How are you managing them?
Absolutely. Well, one of the neat things about these are that you definitely need to have a lot of rules. We have very, very intense rules and we enforce them. With that, we absolutely have the ability to remove people from these very quickly when we need to. And it's not a trigger that we like to pull often, but when somebody relapses or does bad things or they're being a bad housemate, we can remove them from the home, which and very quickly. Like normally we give about 15, 20 minutes and they pack up their stuff and we get them off property because
Wow.
normally the main reason we've removed people is relapse. That's the number one reason we've had to remove people. And actually not a lot in the 4+ years I've done it with all the homes I've had. I'm going to tell you I've been under a dozen times we've had to do that.
Now, is this like a property manager or house manager? Like who's your connection in that house to make sure everything's neat and tidy and the house isn't burning down?
Absolutely. Well, there's 2 setups that you can do. You can do kind of the self-run setup where you put someone who's in the home in charge and they're kind of like the house leader. I personally don't like that setup because you're going to constantly be turning that person over because the ultimate goal here is to get people stable and then back out on their own.
Right.
If they need to stay long though, because really 6 months is as minimum as I like people to stay, because I feel like after 6 months of structure, you're moving into a much better place in life when you leave.
Hmm.
But the way that I've run mine from the beginning and the way I really try to teach people how to run them is either you on the front end be that person who's going by there on a regular basis or hire a staff. And your staff doesn't have to be full time because my people are only part time, even with all the homes that I have. Because I have a 10-minute walkthrough, and it can take an hour if you're hanging out and you're talking, and depending on who you are and who that
Yeah.
person is. But like I have a 10-minute walkthrough that we do with every home. And, so ultimately you could just go and run through each of my homes in 10 to 15 minutes. And see what's going on. And it's about just popping in. We don't have a regular schedule, but I have people pop by my homes at least 5 times a week. And then the guys that live in my homes, because I only run guy homes, they're people that actually want to be in recovery. So this isn't, they're not forced to be here.
Mhm.
There's no mandatory. They can leave whenever they want. They just have rules. So they do tell on each other, hey, if this guy's acting weird, hey, this guy, because they're protecting their own sobriety as well.
Right, right. So in managing that part, you said they're going through these homes 5 times a week, to be able to, you know, that's a lot of going through the houses. Um, for me, that would definitely make sense more to have a staff, but kind of like you said, there's so much turnover to where having a house manager wouldn't work. You know, I want to jump back a little bit is
Yeah.
when you were really figuring out how this model works and how to be able to scale it. You know, what did that look like in the beginning, trying to figure it out? And yeah,
Yeah.
let's
I,
start
I
there.
I spent the first 6 months hardcore on the ground, and I brought in a manager right away, but and it was actually a female, and so females can run these homes as well, and there's nothing they can't do. They can even administer drug tests. We just kind of have to explain how to do that properly, but
Hmm.
we don't need to get into that here. But just
Yeah, yeah.
it's just the types of things that you can do. So. Because I've had that, like, oh, I need men's homes, but I'm a woman and I can't do it. You absolutely can. But I ran through the first 6 months, and I had tons of trial and error because the coaching program that I paid for was literally just an online course, and it really didn't get into these levels of structure. It didn't get into what to do when you were in a home. Where, like, I definitely show people from A to Z and what not to do, like what to do and what
Right.
not to do. But like just having that structure of, how do I walk through a home? So what do I do when I get here? Because you can get overwhelmed really easily and stagger around the house and just, yeah, shiny thing, where
Hmm.
when you walk into the house and you just have it laid out to where you're going to go through, because that's not how I did it at first. I was very erratic when I first started, but then we got our process down where you're going through each room. You're peeking up under the beds, making sure there's not beer cans under there because
Hmm.
that has happened. Like,
Yeah.
especially in those solo rooms. Like, but
Yes, and going through that course, that really taught you how, the beginning steps, and that's all you needed to be able to get into it. And so how are these people paying that rent for their bed?
and that's another huge cherry on top in most areas. There is a lot of funding out there for this. So
Really
almost
interesting.
everyone that comes to me comes pre-funded for 3 to 6 months. So the rehab facilities themselves can sometimes offer funding. There's lots of government funding out there as well, and there's lots of nonprofit funding out there.
Gotcha. So I want to jump into, your coaching program because, that's something you push, and like you just explained to me how many different steps it takes to be able to open this, and you're able to condense it down and make it really simple. So say, after this they want to jump into sober living, they know exactly what to look for now, but to actually go in and run it, what is some of that beginning A to Z on, how do we get started and how do we get it operating and what you're teaching?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I teach everybody is how to start, how to identify your area, like how to make sure that it's going to work in your area, and then how to start pre-filling your homes. Because before I actually, like, I already had a home, but before I actually had it even set up, I had people that were waiting to come into my home. So it's teaching you how to do that proper lead generation because lead generation is just the key, especially us investors and
For sure.
realtors. I got to have a pipeline of houses to rehab or buyers to list for or sellers to list for and buyers to show homes.
Hmm. Yeah.
But that's where I start everybody is making sure that this is a viable option before you go out and buy 3 houses and be like, I'm going to go sober living. But then I work with them on how to actually like interview people because there is a process and there's some key things that you really need to ask and know before you bring these people into your home that'll really set you up for a higher success rate. And then just like the basic setup of the home, what is everything that you need in this house to make it successful for people to move in here and be comfortable and want to stay. Because again, they don't have to stay in your home. So they can leave just as easily as you want. And then all the things to do to keep up on like, hey, is my home running efficiently? Am I keep because like we do random drug tests. We do a lot of those types of things to make sure that people are following their program. And then also like making sure that people are going to meetings because we as a house have a set amount of meetings they need to go to, and they normally have a set amount of meetings that they need to go for whatever outpatient drug clinic they're working with.
That makes sense. Yeah, it seems like yeah, there's definitely a lot that you've had to go through the grinder to be able to learn from. So being able to teach that back and just really simplify it, that's amazing to be able to see, especially when everybody's kind of looking in different directions right now with what do I do? I have homes not renting, the rent doesn't cover this, so what do I do? So I want to break down like where are these, who are you going to make sure you have these residents already in the pipeline to be able to move into the homes? Like what is it, government? Is it like just different, AA meetings? Like how do you get your tenants?
The number one source for getting tenants is going to be those inpatient drug clinics because they're actively in there. And what'll happen is once you get relationships with these clinics, which does take time to build, you're networking again. And the main point of marketing that I work is towards the inpatient drug clinics. Like I don't send flyers out to AA or anything like that. I think if you're having a hard time, those are great tasks to do. But really, the nuts and bolts of this are going to be working with those inpatient drug clinics because not only do they have a lot of people there, these are people that are going through a full drug clinic. So they're coming out clean and ready to jump into a program. And also, they are able to have a lot of funding coming through that way. So if you're just marketing outside and you're trying to get people off the street, well, how do you know they're clean? And then how are they going to be funded to get into your program?
That makes sense. And what are some of these systems that you're using to be able to manage all of this? Because there's like everybody, like a real estate flipper, we're using Resimply. There's so many different CRMs out there. Like, what are some of those tools and systems that you're using to be able to manage and track all of your homes?
It is called Sobriety Hub, and it is a CRM for exactly this business. It's amazing. It breaks everything down from the house all the way to the bed. And then it's got tracking details in there, not tracking like you're GPSing somebody's every move, but like one of our guys goes to a meeting, he can go, boom, I'm at a meeting. It'll ping him and it'll drop a little pin on their GPS, and that's all it does. It doesn't follow him after that. So, but like it's and then it's right in my system. All of our paperwork is done through this system now. When I started, I had paper contracts and file cabinets full of stuff because it's sensitive data that you have to keep
Yeah.
for X amount of years. Now everything is done through basically like a DocuSign. So I send them a text or an email, and they do all of my contracts right there on their phone or their computer. It's all stored in a secure server that's absolutely compliant with all of the people that I work with, all of like the different inpatient clinics and things like that. So it helps me generate reports. It gives me historical data. So when I start getting grants, which I do get grants, and I don't talk about grants much because people want to start there. You need houses. Don't even think about grants until you're running your third or fourth home. But there's so much grant money out there for this, and this just makes it so push button. Here's my statistics of what I've done over the year. Here's my recovery rate. Here's my recidivism rate. Here's how long people stay in my house. It's an amazing tool.
Yeah, that definitely simplifies everything across the board. I mean, it's kind of like what everybody wants to use for real estate investing. Hey, if y'all just have it in one CRM that does everything for you, it's super simple and easy, and that's what everybody's looking for. So, do you have any like links for that or
I will shoot that over, and I actually can get
okay.
you a discount. I do not own it,
Yeah,
so it's not mine or anything like that. But I do have a link that'll get you 10% off your first year. And
awesome. Yeah, if you send that over to me, I'll put that in the show notes for everybody.
awesome.
And now that you have 14 of these homes and you're looking to open more, what in the beginning it was looking like you just kind of wanted to be able to make your homes cash flow and stop bleeding, but what has this turned into now that you're so ingrained in the system and you've met so many different people? How does this impact you now?
Absolutely. Well, I've always wanted to do something to give back and help, and it was always going to be next year. Oh, I'm into all these projects. I'm doing all these flips. I'm building all these rentals. I'll do something good next year, next year, next year, and then 20 years later, it still was next year. So it kind of forced me into this because I do come from a pretty heavy background of addiction, so this is close to my heart as well. but the changes that it has made in me and what I've got to see and the difference that this makes is I can't even express it. I mean, to watch somebody go from I can't even look you in the eyes and that they don't have a full set of teeth to where they got their mouth fixed and now they've got a big bright smile and they've got that spark in them again and they've got a vehicle and they're headed back across the country to see their family members that they haven't seen in 20 years because they hopped on a train from Detroit at 14 years old with a drug addiction. Like, how do you even really express that to someone who hasn't seen it or helped it and got to just be a little part of it? Just the fact that I got to have a little finger in that and put a little DNA on it because they got to come into my home and this was the final place where they decided to get sober. Because I can't make them sober, but this is where they decided to get sober. That that'll tear you up.
Yeah, that's such a super rewarding process. Like I feel somewhat towards like when I got to help coach pole vault for some high school kids, watching them get better and that's on a smaller scale, completely different. But yeah, on these, you're watching people just change and develop from the heavy addictions to be able to getting their life together and being able to, go do something with their lives. And that's super, super rewarding. And it's amazing to see that there's systems out here or out in real estate that you can do that. And same with assisted living on the other side. So many different avenues in real estate to be able to help people. And Jim, before we send you out of here, what's coming up that you're excited about here?
Well, one of the biggest things I'm excited about is we did just start a nonprofit for this. And as an entrepreneur, you can do so much more than just run these homes. Like I own a small construction company and a restaurant, so we employ a lot of people that live with us. And like with our nonprofit, we're getting to where now we're giving people scholarships. We just sent a bunch of people to flagger school, so now they have a state flagger certification, so they can go get like state jobs, standing on the highways with the slow down stop sign. Sending people to construction school to learn how to weld, to learn how to frame, to learn how to roof. Just it opens so many of these doors to things that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are already doing, but they would never think to offer them in this way. So those are some of the most exciting things that we've got coming up.
Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Well, Jim, if somebody wants to connect with you or look deeper into your coaching program, what's the best place to connect with you and go check that out?
Absolutely. JimBoad.com is my website. And then that kind of breaks down my coaching program. And my coaching program is called Group Home Accelerator. I'm on all social medias with that, and I give a lot of free content and a lot of good tips and tricks just on any of those. So
Yeah, and just for those listening, we will link all of that in the show notes to be able to connect with Jim and his coaching program. So, Jim, this has been awesome. It's so cool to be able to see these other different avenues in real estate because I think when people get in, it's shiny object syndrome. Do I flip houses? Do I get into co-living? And now these two big things are coming up when cash flow is really, really tough. So just being able to see it from different avenues is super, super cool to see. And what you're doing with sober living and giving these people, new lives and, a fresh start. It's amazing to see. So, Jim, thank you so much for giving us your time today. We'll link all of your information in the show notes. But as for this episode of the Leadway Podcast, this has been Jim and Chris, and I'll see you next time.
have a great one.